I just know you're ready to hear about a little crime. Welcome to Crime Daddies.
Warning, this podcast is hosted by two true crime dads that will talk about murder, drugs, rape, and offenses against children. We may crack jokes and make light of something so terrible that has happened, but it will never be about the victim or the victim's family. You have been warned. Welcome back to Crime Daddies, everybody. I am Hunter.
And I am Jacob.
And we are so happy to have each and every single one of you listening to us again for another week and another crazy case.
Yeah, we're glad to have you guys here. It's been a crazy ride so far, so thanks for tagging along every week.
Yes, because we recently just surpassed 1,000 followers on Facebook, which it's a little milestone, but to Crime Daddies, it is a big milestone that 1,000 of you will take time out of your day to listen to us.
It's hard to think that within the past few months, 1,000 people have taken the time to go and just follow a Facebook page. It's awesome. It might seem like not a lot of people, but imagine 1,000 people in one room. You know, imagine every one of our 1,000 followers in one room.
And we also just surpassed 17,000 streams, and that's awesome. We're hoping that we get to 50,000 by the end of the year, so please, all of you, help us reach that milestone.
Yeah, and we appreciate every stream, every listen, every follow, every bit of engagement you guys give us. We want to just thank you.
So without further ado, everybody, Jacob is going to be bringing us the case today. So what are you bringing to the table, Jacob?
Well, before I get into the case, Hunter, I want to ask you a question and the audience a question at home. And I'm asking you guys all the same thing. Whenever you hear the word Stockholm Syndrome, what do you think?
I think about somebody that's been abused and they fall in love with their abuser.
Right. So I'd imagine you guys probably all think of the same thing if you've been around crime, and not even crime, but just any kind of scenario where there's a power dynamic. The term Stockholm Syndrome pops up, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have Stockholm Syndrome with my wife.
Shut up, dude. Alexa, this is for you.
Oh, no, other way around.
Oh,
no, I'm just kidding.
Dude. Oh, Lord. So yeah, if you guys have ever been around true crime or heard of these scenarios where there's some sort of power dynamic, the term Stockholm Syndrome tends to come up. It's become one of those phrases that kind of has like worked its way into everyday language. You hear it in a lot of movies and TV shows, and people use it on social media sometimes. You even hear like a lot of news outlets throw it around whenever there's a hostage situation, and sometimes people just use it jokingly like Hunter just did. Someone refuses to leave a toxic relationship, and people immediately say, "Oh, they've got Stockholm Syndrome." Somebody stays loyal to a terrible sports team for years and years, and suddenly you're joking that they have Stockholm Syndrome. I know my buddies have been telling me I have Stockholm Syndrome because I've been a Bulls fan, even though they haven't done anything in my whole lifetime.
They never should have let D Rose go, which I guess they didn't let him go. He kind of had to stop playing over an injury, didn't he?
They traded him.
I mean, I know they traded him, but it was ultimately because of his injury, correct?
Yeah, but D Rose is a homegrown kid. Keep him on your team. I can go on and on about that.
Listen,
guys,
I don't disagree.
I'm going to spare you.
I don't disagree. I'm just saying his injury is what ultimately led him off the Bulls.
It did. And I'm going to tell you guys right now before I get into the case, I'm a big D Rose fan. I'm a big Bulls fan. So much that my daughter, her name is Rosemary, and Derrick Rose is my favorite player. I named my daughter after my favorite basketball player. And my wife didn't know until afterwards. So who won that one, Riley? But yeah, some people might say I have Stockholm Syndrome because I'm so loyal to this team that disappoints me year in and year out. It's a phrase that, I mean, a lot of people recognize, but I wonder how many of us actually wonder where it comes from, right? What it actually means. And I'll be honest, I was one of those people. I just kind of said it without knowing the background. I knew the phrase long before I ever knew where it came from or what psychologists actually thought about Stockholm Syndrome. Like a lot of things that become part of popular culture, the meaning eventually gets watered down, and we hear it so often that we just assume we understand it. But in reality, many of us are only familiar with a simplified version of the idea, right? And so at its most basic level, Stockholm Syndrome is just used to describe a situation where someone who has been abused or manipulated, controlled, or even held against their will begins to develop, I guess, positive feelings toward the very person responsible for causing that kind of suffering. On the surface, that doesn't seem to make sense, right? It's almost the opposite of what you'd expect. If someone hurts us, our instinct tells us that we should probably fear that person, or maybe you want to get away from that person that's hurting you. So why would someone ever become emotionally attached to the person harming them? That's the question psychologists have been trying to answer for decades at this point.
Once something becomes so normal, that is your normal, so you don't realize you're missing out on something else.
Right. And interestingly enough, despite how common this phrase is, Stockholm Syndrome isn't actually even recognized as an official mental health diagnosis. If you open the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders, or the DSM, if you guys have ever been interested in psychology and things like that, it's pretty much just like the big book that psychologists or psychiatrists might use to classify mental health conditions. You won't find Stockholm Syndrome listed in that book. That surprises a lot of people because we've heard the term used with so much confidence over the years that it almost sounds like it's an established diagnosis. But the reality is it's much more complicated. Today, psychologists look at Stockholm Syndrome less as a diagnosis, but more of a response to prolonged trauma. It's one way researchers have tried to explain how the human mind adapts when someone feels trapped, powerless, or completely independent on another person for survival. Whether someone is being emotionally abused, physically abused, manipulated, isolated, or just controlled, the brain has one primary goal in those moments: survive. Human beings are remarkably adaptable. Under extreme stress, we don't always react the way we would imagine we would from the comfort of our own homes. We like to think that we would fight back, right? We'd leave or we'd call for help. We'd do something dramatic to get out of a scenario. But trauma has a way of kind of breaking the rules, right? When someone feels like they have no control over circumstances, the mind sometimes looks for a possible way to just reduce the danger instead of getting away from the danger, even if it means trying to understand the person that's causing them harm. Psychologists have even suggested that victims in these situations may begin paying close attention to small acts of kindness from their abuser. Maybe the abuse pauses for a while. Maybe the abuser apologizes. Maybe they even provide food or comfort, even reassurance, just small words. Maybe they just don't become as violent today as they were yesterday. To someone looking in from the outside, that's bullcrap. You're still being abused. It's very insignificant, but to someone who lives in constant fear, those brief moments of relief become really significant.
But on the flip side of that, in all reality, some people do thrive in toxic relationships. Like, they need the toxicity to almost keep them entertained.
Yeah, and that doesn't necessarily mean that the victim approves of the abuse.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, like, subconsciously, it's like they enjoy the excitement of it, of the unknown of what's about to happen.
Yeah.
Whereas they think that safe and security is boring.
Yeah, what it means is that the human brain is incredibly good at adapting for survival.
It's kind of like this, and I'm not trying to say this to, judge anybody.
Right.
But like some girls that were raised by terrible fathers end up being with terrible men because that's what they're used to, and they think that that is normal.
Right. I think what you're trying to say, Hunter, is that survival isn't always logical. It doesn't always make sense when you're trying to survive, as long as you're surviving, right?
Or even vice versa. Some men that had over-controlling and overbearing mothers will get with a woman that's like that, and then their wife and then their mother will butt heads over who's going to have the power control of the man.
Yeah. It's very messy. It's confusing, and it's very difficult to understand from the outside, but even more difficult to understand from the inside. In recent years, many mental health professionals have actually moved away from using the phrase altogether. Instead, you hear terms like trauma bonding or coercive control or survival response. Those concepts are supported by a broader body of psychological research and help explain why people sometimes remain emotionally connected to somebody who has repeatedly harmed them. These aren't relationships built on health, love, or trust. They're shaped by fear, dependency, and often isolation. And I think that's a really important distinction because it's easy to sit on the outside of a situation and ask questions like, why didn't they just leave? Or why would they defend someone who hurt them? But those questions usually come from people who have never experienced that kind of psychological control. Fear changes the way you think. Trauma changes the way you make decisions. What seems obvious to me from a distance might be impossible for someone who is in the scenario themselves. And so as I researched today's case, I found myself coming back to these ideas over and over again. Not because Stockholm Syndrome explains everything. It doesn't. Nothing ever fully explains everything. But it's just a reminder that human behavior is not simple. Especially as simple as we'd like it to be sometimes. People don't always react the way that we expect. Relationships are not always what they appear to be from the outside. And sometimes all these different things in your relationship become so tangled together that the people living through it struggle to separate one emotion from the other. So as we move into today's case, I want you to keep one question in the back of your mind. How much of what we do is driven by love, and how much is driven by fear? Let me ask you that, Hunter. How much of what you do as a man is driven by love, but how much is driven by fear? For example, am I doing things because I love to have a nice car, or am I doing things because I fear having a car that needs work done, right? Things like that. Am I doing it because I'm loving it, or am I doing it because I'm scared of the other side?
I feel like personally for me, growing up, not having a whole lot of money definitely pushed me and drove me into working hard and, obtaining what I have today. Now that I've accumulated nice things, I realize that materialistic things never really make you happy.
Right.
So I would say now I'm continuing to work hard because I have a fear of not being the best father and husband to my family. Like I want to be able to give them everything I never had as a kid.
Right. And so what I'm trying to say is whenever you think about love and fear, think of emotion as one big circle. And at some point, love and fear come together and they're the same feeling.
We could use this podcast as an example because when we first talked about doing this, there was probably a fear or even hesitation about us even doing this.
Right.
But now we love doing it. So the fear and hesitation's gone. Now it's a habit and a love for us doing this every week.
And it came all the way back around. It started at one and ended in the other. And that's where Stockholm Syndrome feeds itself, is where the lines get blurred between love and fear. So with that in mind, let me take you all the way back to the beginning. Our story begins on the morning of August 23rd, 1973, in Stockholm, Sweden. It was a Thursday, and like any other weekday morning, people were making their way into work. Office buildings were opening, commuters filled the streets, and employees at the Kreditbacken, located in Norrmalmstorg Square, had every reason to believe it would be another ordinary day. None of them could have imagined that by lunchtime, their workplace became the center of one of the most famous hostage situations in modern history. That's right, guys. I'm telling you about a hostage situation. Shortly after the bank opened, a 32-year-old escaped convict named Jan Erik Olsen walked through the front doors carrying a concealed submachine gun. Without warning, he pulled the weapon, fired a shot in the ceiling, and reportedly shouted in English, "The party has just begun." Now, I know you guys are probably picturing a movie scene of like a bank heist where a guy walks in and pulls a gun out and shoots it in the air. That's literally what's happening. And as you guys can probably tell, panic erupts inside the bank. Customers and employees immediately dove for cover as Olsen took control of the lobby. During this initial chaos, a responding police officer was shot and wounded in the hand, and within minutes, Olsen had taken 4 bank employees hostage. Those hostages were Kristen Enmark, Birgitta Lundblad, Elizabeth Oldgren, and Sven Sefstrom. They were ordinary people who had simply gone to work that morning. They weren't trained negotiators or police officers or soldiers. They were just bank employees who suddenly found themselves trapped in a very unimaginable situation. I couldn't imagine going to work and the next thing you know, someone walks in there with a gun, tell me the party started, and they take me hostage.
This guy's either got some major balls or nothing to lose.
Well, they said he's an escaped convict, so he's just probably trying to get some money to keep going on the run.
So he's got nothing to lose and he's got some major balls.
Yeah.
Because for an escaped convict to just walk in and do something like this, knowing probably your face is plastered everywhere.
Yeah. He's got big balls because Olsen, he wasn't really interested in surrendering quietly. He quickly presented authorities with a list of demands. He wanted 3 million Swedish kroner in cash, which is, I don't know, some sort of currency, I guess. He wanted firearms, he wanted bulletproof vests, helmets, and a getaway vehicle. Like, this guy thought he was going to be able to walk into this bank and walk out of it decked to the nine. But perhaps his most unusual demand was that another convicted criminal, Clark Olofsson, be brought directly to the bank. Olsen and Olofsson had become acquainted while serving time in prison together, and Olsen believed his friend could help negotiate with police and improve their chances of escaping. This guy and his homie from prison, they had this thing mapped out. These are just boys right here. They thought it through. They're just ride or die boys right here.
These are some pretty major requests from a criminal, to be honest.
Ain't that wild?
As the police, it's almost like, do you just try to fight this guy or do you just give him what he wants?
Yeah, he's like, hey, I want a lot of money. I want weapons. I want a getaway vehicle. Oh, and my homeboy locked up. I want him out of the can. Remarkably, believe it or not, Hunter, Swedish authorities agreed. In what remains one of the most controversial decisions made during the standoff, police transported Clark Olofsson from prison and allowed him to enter the building. Officials hoped that Olofsson's presence might help calm and reduce the likelihood of violence if he got one of his requests. Whether that decision helped or really complicated the situation is still debated today. So you heard that right. The police had one guy holding people hostage and decided to give him another guy to hold these people hostage. The group eventually retreated into the bank's reinforced vault, where they barricaded themselves behind a massive steel door. What many people expected to be a robbery lasting a few hours quickly evolved into something far much larger. Hours, Hunter, I'm telling you, they turned into days. Negotiators remained outside attempting to communicate with the robbers while police surrounded the building. Snipers took positions overlooking the bank, journalists crowded the streets, and television cameras broadcast constant updates to a nation that had become captivated by the unfolding drama. Inside the vault, conditions were far from comfortable, right? You're in a bank vault. And I'm going to tell you guys right now, my office building I work in is in an old bank, and some of our offices are in old bank vaults, and they are not comfortable. They've been renovated, obviously, but even still, they're very, they feel tight, you know. You can definitely tell it's like a reinforced room instead of being in a normal, just insulated room. During this, the hostages slept on the floor. They shared this very small, confined space with their captors, and they lived with constant uncertainty of not knowing whether they would survive. Every day that passed added another layer of psychological strain. They had no control over what was happening outside the vault, and very little control over what happened inside it. Their lives depend entirely on the decisions of these two armed men standing only a few feet away from them. As negotiations continued, Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme became personally involved. The hostage situation had become national news, and government officials were under enormous pressure to resolve it peacefully. Throughout the whole 6-day ordeal, negotiators repeatedly attempted to convince Olsen to surrender, while also trying to ensure the safety of the 4 hostages inside. One of the most remarkable moments of the standoff occurred when hostage Kristen Enmark was allowed to speak directly to the Prime Minister over the telephone. According to the published accounts, she urged the government not to launch an attack on the bank. She expressed concern that an aggressive police operation might result in everyone in the bank being killed. During that same conversation, she reportedly expressed confidence in Clark Olofsson and suggested that she feared a rescue attempt more than she feared remaining inside the vault. Those comments shocked people across Sweden and would later become one of the most defining moments of the case. As the days passed, reports began emerging that the relationships inside the vault were becoming increasingly, I guess I'd say, complicated. According to later interviews, the robbers occasionally showed moments of kindness towards the hostages. Olsen repeatedly gave Kristen Enmark his jacket when she became cold. He comforted her after she experienced a nightmare while inside the vault.
Nicest heister in Sweden.
Yeah, exactly. Whenever Miss Elizabeth Aldgren struggled with the cramped conditions because of, I guess she had claustrophobia, Olsen reportedly allowed her to leave the vault briefly while he tied a rope so she couldn't really escape. None of these actions changed the reality that the hostages were being held against their will, right? But they would later become more important details as psychologists and journalists attempted to understand what happened inside that bank.
Sounds like this guy was, so far, an evil charmer that was able to gain these people's trust somehow.
Right? He was able to get him on his side, even though he was the one that was holding them hostage and putting their life in danger. But meanwhile, police outside continued searching for a peaceful solution. Authorities considered several tactical options, but remained concerned that any aggressive attempt to enter the vault would place the hostages in immediate danger. Imagine being in that position as a law enforcement officer. It's like, do you go in after 6 days and just try and end this? Or do you let it go on for days and days and days?
It's very hard to say what is the right answer, because could they get it done sooner? Yes. But if they advance right now, is there the possibility of innocent bystanders being harmed? Yes. So I don't think there's really a clear answer in these scenarios.
Yeah, which is why my hat goes off to law enforcement, because they have to make hard decisions that I don't have to make. And so, obviously, every decision in this instance carries enormous risk. If you wait too long, the robbers might become desperate. If you move too quickly, innocent people could lose their lives. So for nearly a week, negotiators walked that delicate line while Sweden just watched anxiously. But finally, Hunter, on August 28th, 1973, after 6 days inside the vault, Swedish authorities decided to bring the standoff to an end. Police drilled through the ceiling above the vault and introduced tear gas into the confined space. Now, this gas forced Olsen and Olofsson out of hiding, and both men surrendered without any further violence, believe it or not. Miraculously, all 4 hostages survived this whole ordeal, and despite spending nearly a week at gunpoint inside a bank vault, none suffered life-threatening physical injuries.
So at the end of the day, they really did this for nothing other than, I guess, to get some excitement.
Right. They didn't think it through. Like, he got his buddy out of prison for 6 days, but then
they didn't get away with anything.
They didn't get any money. They didn't get anything they wanted.
They starved for 6 days over a little bit of excitement.
Right.
And probably added a bunch more time to their already charges.
Mm-hmm. And so you might expect that once these hostages were safely outside, that they would, like, I don't know, feel relief that they don't have to be in a vault anymore. And they might have gratitude towards the police, and maybe be even upset at these 2 men who held them captive. But that's not entirely what happened. In the days following the robbery, several of these hostages, Hunter, publicly criticized the police and their response, and they expressed public sympathy for their captors. Kristen Enmark later said she feared the police more than she ever feared the robbers during portions of the standoff, because she believed an assault in the vault would get everyone killed. Some of the hostages remained in contact with Clark Olofsson after the robbery ended, meaning after they got out and he was back in prison, they were talking to this guy, which is a detail that's just fascinated me.
I wonder if they ever put money on their books.
It sounds like they were like buddies. After watching these very unusual reactions, a Swedish criminologist by the name of Niels Beirut, he attempted to explain what appeared to be some sort of emotional attachment between the hostages and their captors. As newspapers around the world reported on the case, the phrase that he had coined eventually evolved into one that almost everyone recognizes today: Stockholm Syndrome. By the time the tear gas cleared and the vault doors opened on August 28, 1973, the hostage crisis was over. For the police, it was successful. You saved all 4 hostages, and you were able to get 2 robbers, Jan-Erik Olsen and Clark Olofsson, and put them back into custody. And so if you look strictly at the outcome, authorities had accomplished what they wanted to do. Nobody inside that vault lost their life. But almost immediately, something happened that no one expected. As reporters began investigating the hostages in the days that followed, the public was surprised by what they heard. Several of the hostages outright defending their captors. Like I said, even Kristen Enmark later explained from her perspective the greatest danger toward the end of the standoff wasn't the men standing beside her. It was a possibility that bullets, explosions, or tear gas would turn the vault into a death trap.
Imagine being so good of a charmer that you can be a major piece of shit and then get people to still like you.
Right? Isn't that wild? So obviously, to a lot of us from the outside, that doesn't make sense. The robbers had literally threatened these people with guns to put them in a bank vault, made them sleep in confined spaces for days. They didn't have adequate food. The police were the ones that were trying to save their lives. So why would anyone criticize the police who are saving you, but express sympathy towards the people that are actively holding you against your will?
Well, we could probably tie it back to what I said at the beginning of an episode. Imagine you're in an abusive relationship with somebody and say your parents are trying to get you out of that situation and you're kind of like, no, I love him.
Yep. That's what it is. And so within a few years, Stockholm Syndrome became a part of popular culture. You hear a lot of movies reference it, televisions use it, news organizations used it, and eventually the phrase escaped psychology altogether. People began using it to describe, like you're saying, toxic relationship or abusive partners, even unhealthy workplaces. You know, you have a job that treats you like shit, but for some reason you never leave, right? You're like, oh, it's good enough, but that's a form of it.
Manipulation's a hell of a thing.
Right. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, even me with my sports teams, I can see my team lose year in and year out, and they make some posts on social media saying, hey, we're going to do better this year, and I'll feed on their bullshit, and they're going to let me down. And so it's a very funny way to relate, but it is technically it is a way to kind of be a part of it. But one thing, even though it's never been recognized as an official psychiatric diagnosis that's listed in the DSM, it is something that surprises a lot of people because the term has been so familiar that many would assume that it is a formally recognized mental illness. Instead, many experts argue that the hostages' behaviors were a rational survival strategy, like I talked about. Rather than evidence of a unique psychological syndrome, think about their situation. They had to spend 6 days locked in a vault with armed men. Every decision they made carried life or death consequences. So if speaking calmly reduced tensions, they probably would speak calmly. If building trust with their captors increased the chances of everyone survived, then they probably built trust. And it was practical. Some psychologists suggest that what looks like affection may have just been something more simpler. We're animals. And so what do? We adapt. If we can't get out of a scenario, we have to adapt to the scenario. And if there's one thing about the human spirit and human beings in general, is that we are remarkably good at adapting. Whenever we are placed in an environment when another person has completely controlled your safety, your brain begins searching for ways to reduce danger. If you can't get out of it, might as well make it better, right? So you pay attention to moods, you learn routines, you avoid conflict, you recognize moments when the other person seems calmer, and that you naturally gravitate towards these moments because they improve your chances of survival. From the outside, that can look like emotional attachment. Reminds me of a case, man, I forget her name, but it was a little girl that got kidnapped, and over time she ended up having the children of her kidnapper, right? And some people afterwards said that she had severe Stockholm Syndrome, but it's not because she was loyal to him. It's because she had to adapt in that scenario, that if she was kind to him and if she did these things to him, it would make sure she was safe.
Isn't that the one where they had her locked up in a shed in the backyard, I think?
Yeah, like had like a weird little compound. He had a wife, but he had her and a few kids, and it was just, yeah, I forget the name of her, and it's going to come back to me after this episode, obviously, but a lot of psychologists said she might have Stockholm Syndrome, but in reality, it might have just been a way for her to adapt to the situation to make sure she survived.
Didn't she like kind of forget her name too?
Yeah, she did. But it was like the moment she was removed out of it, she was able to see what was wrong. But while you're in the mix of it, it's like it was hard for her to be scared the whole time. And so she did what she could to do to be safe. Other researchers have argued that the media itself played a major role in shaping the public's understanding of this case altogether. Once newspapers began using the phrase Stockholm Syndrome, every interaction between the hostages and robbers was interpreted through that lens. Suddenly, every kind word or every calm conversation and every criticism of the police became evidence that supports that theory, even though the reality may have been far more complicated. And maybe that's one of the biggest lessons this story teaches, is that, one, human behavior is very messy at times. We like simple explanations because they make us feel like we understand the world. We like labels, we like categories, we like believing people will always react a certain way under pressure. But real life rarely works that way. Fear doesn't affect everyone the same way. Trauma doesn't always affect everyone the same way. And survival doesn't look the same for every person. Some people might freeze. Some people might fight. Some of us run. And sometimes we just do whatever it takes to get us to the next hour, to the next day, to the next week. That doesn't mean you're weak. For whatever reason you pick either of those options, it doesn't mean you're irrational. It means you're human. And so as I researched today's case, I found myself thinking about whether Stockholm Syndrome is real and more about what this story says about the incredible adaptability of the human mind. Put yourself in their shoes for a moment, and you imagine spending nearly a week of your life wondering, am I going to die? Am I going to live? Am I going to see my family? Am I going to make them mad? Are the police going to kill me? What's going to happen? Imagine every conversation you have with someone determines if you lived or died. Most of us haven't experienced that. So maybe we should all just be careful before judging how someone else responds in those scary scenarios. I also think this case teaches us something about the power of language. One robbery in Stockholm, Sweden gave the world a phrase that has now been repeated millions of times worldwide. But somewhere along the way, the phrase became bigger than what people thought it was. These 4 hostages weren't psychological case studies. They were just ordinary people who survived a very extraordinary ordeal. Jan Erik Olsen eventually served his complete prison sentence before later moving to Thailand, where he lived for many years before his death in 2022. Clark Olofsson returned to prison multiple times over the course of his life for other offenses, and he honestly became one of Sweden's most notorious career criminals. Meanwhile, the debate over Stockholm Syndrome has never really ended. More than 50 years later, psychologists, criminologists, journalists, and a lot of historians still disagree about what happened inside that vault. And honestly, that's okay. Not every question has a very simple answer. Sometimes things are so complex that all you can really do is just shrug your shoulders and say, we don't really fully know, right? So here at Crime Daddies, we try to approach every case with that mindset that not everything's black and white. Sometimes things are really gray. We don't want to force every story into like a neat little box just because it makes for a better headline. Real life is complicated, and people deserve courtesy of acknowledging that complexity. And if there's one thing I want you guys to take away from today's episode, it isn't just the definition of Stockholm Syndrome. It's this. The next time you hear someone ask, why didn't they just leave? Why didn't they fight back? Remember this story. Humans don't always behave the way we think they should when they're terrified. Sometimes survival itself is the bravest thing a person can do.
Very interesting case and great detail into the case, Jacob. Hope all of you listening enjoyed today's episode that Jacob brought to us and maybe gave you a better understanding of Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah, and this is just another way of us to kind of branch out, not make every episode about the horrific crime of murder. There's a lot of crime that happens every day, whether it's hostages, whether it's robberies, whether it's anything. There's a lot of things that happen. And this one, I think just the historical significance of it, because it defines a lot of things that we hear and a lot of the things we feel whenever we hear other stories. I think it's nice to hear about where things come from. And so maybe I'm just a big psychology nerd and history nerd, but thank you guys for coming and listening today.
Yeah, thank you everybody for being back every week and listening to Jacob and I just talk true crime with everybody. We love the family that we are building here at Crime Daddies, and we really enjoy you all engaging with us on social media and on the podcast streaming platforms. that being said, do us a huge favor. If you can take a few seconds out of your day, leave us a 5-star review. It helps us out so much. So, me and Jacob are always going to be bringing you this podcast every week. And the only thing we ask from you all is to give us a little bit of your time to leave us those reviews, like some of our episodes, and comment on these episodes. Share them with friends or family that's also interested in true crime.
And if you guys want to go ahead and go to our website at crimedaddies.riverside.com, you can access all these platforms where you can go and hit these reviews and give us 5 stars and even comment. And if you go ahead and subscribe on Riverside, then you guys get access to our newsletter. And if you guys were subscribed last week, you got the first access to the Crime Daddies merch website. So if you guys are interested in that, we put it out a week early for everyone that's subscribed to us on Riverside. That link will be available pinned on our Facebook page, and you can go find that post if you're interested in supporting us.
And Jacob and I actually decided to go ahead and do merch because we had several of you guys reach out and ask about it. And we figured if there's several people asking about it, then I guess we need to bring the listeners something they would want. And it's very humbling. And me and Jacob are honestly very honored to be able to give back to you all.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly cool that you guys want to support us and wear something that shows our podcast on it. And it's nothing fancy. And what me and Hunter wanted to do if we were going to drop merch is that we don't want you guys to feel like we're just trying to reach in your pockets. And so we kind of tossed this idea back and forth before we ever did it, but we had a handful of people that just said they were interested in it. And so we just figured if you guys are interested, it would just be best if we could put it out there. And we did it in such a way that it's affordable. And we chose a good quality t-shirt that should be comfortable. It's Comfort Colors if you're familiar with that brand. And so me and Hunter will make a very small commission off of every sale. But I want to just give you guys a promise here right now that we are still full-time employees and dads and husbands. And so we have yet to make a single penny off of this. And if we do ever make a penny off of this, I can promise you that penny will get reinvested back into the business, back into the podcast to bring you guys more cases and eventually do stuff, maybe get better quality, maybe even have a video aspect to the cases we provide, maybe being able to have better quality on our YouTube channels if you guys want to see videos that have pictures with it, stuff like that, that as of right now, we don't have. But if we are able to provide to you guys later down the road, every penny we make off this just gets reinvested back into it.
Yeah, that is a huge goal that Jacob and I would love to accomplish, is to be able to do video podcasting by the end of the year on YouTube. And obviously the audio portion of that video will be still available on the streaming platforms for podcasts.
Right.
But that is a major goal Jacob and I want to accomplish, is to be able to give you guys a video produced podcast.
Yeah, and so this merch thing is just going to help make that goal more achievable. It's not going to be funding our lifestyle in any way. We make just a couple bucks off a t-shirt. So it's not going to be like we're going to be Scrooge McDuck over here with a lot of money.
No, and just to be blunt with you guys, we could have got a cheaper quality t-shirt and made more money off each sale, but
right.
At the end of the day, we wanted to give you guys the option of a quality t-shirt that's going to last washing it several times and still feel comfortable wearing it.
Right. And so if you guys are interested in that, go look at our pinned post on Facebook and you can find that link. And if you guys were subscribed to us on Riverside, you would have got that 1 week early. So other than that, if you guys want to go ahead and go follow us on social media, to find that link, we are on Facebook at Crime Daddies. Instagram, we are there at Crime Daddies Pod. You can find my personal TikTok and Instagram at Jacob W.C. Smith. And then you can find my Facebook at Jacob Smith. And then for Hunter,
you can find me on Facebook at Hunter Ben Frampton. You can find me on Instagram at hunter.semo. And you can find me on TikTok at semo_Hunter.
But other than that, if you guys just want to go ahead and engage with us there, it'd be awesome. We have like a lot of really cool conversations with you guys all the time. There's certain people that we get really excited to talk about these cases with whenever they drop. They respond in our comments and they respond in our messages. And so just keep growing the family. Be a part of the Crime Daddies gang. And we're just going to keep bringing you more episodes. And hopefully the quality gets better and you guys just stick with the ride. Other than that, I'm going to hand it off to Hunter.
Remember, everybody, listen to the crime, don't be the crime.
Yes, sir.